talk about these issues. Joining us now, political analyst Michael Yaki is here. And let's start with, of course, we have our own election, but we want to start with what Catherine just talked about, what's going on in Wisconsin. Up to $80 million on this race being spent in Wisconsin. A lot of that money, up to maybe 50, 60 million, coming from outside the state. This has political implications nationally. Why?
Well, the Republicans are trying to turn this into a referendum on President Obama. Wisconsin is a state he won by 14 points in 2008. He's up maybe 5 or 6 now. They'd like to bring that down even further. Scott Walker wins. They're going to say it's a win for the Republicans. Wisconsin moves in the toss-up column. Resources have to be diverted. It's all about how you make someone spend their money. Are
they right? Is this a referendum, though, on the president and on the future of this country, because the state is so divided?
I'm not too sure. First of all, the exit polls show that 90% of the people made up their minds over a month ago. This is not something that people came into with any sort of, well, I'm going to try and decide what to do. They're either for union, against union. It's split 50-50 down the middle, people coming down the polls. Union turnout is going to be the key in this election. So for the Republicans, actually, if they see a big union turnout in this election, I would be a little more worried about that than if Scott Walker squeaked by with 1 or 2%.
All right, let's come to California now. Proposition 28 deals with term limits. Proposition 29 deals with that $1 additional tax on cigarettes.
If you got 'em.
Yeah, so let's start. What do you think? Any predictions on either of these?
Well, I mean, the vote is still going on right now. I think that 28 is very confusing in terms of what is it about term limits. I thought we had term limits, half the people are saying, so I think that's kind of an iffy proposition. 29, you know, I think that people in this state don't like big tobacco, and I think in the end, Prop 29 will carry the day. We'll see what happens at the polls.
Although big tobacco certainly spent a great deal of money against Proposition 29. Okay, let's talk about the whole open primary that people are dealing with now. It's called top 2 by some, which means that the top 2 vote getters in today's election will move on to November regardless of party. It is a bit confusing as well.
I call it a second chance election, because in a heavily Democratic or Republican district, all you want to do is finish second and get a rematch in November, essentially. You can have two, I would say in the 2nd Congressional District and the 15th Congressional District, Lynn Woolsey's seat, Pete Stark's seat, you're going to see 2 Democrats finish 1 and 2, and it's going to be 2 Democrats going at it in November.
And the whole goal of this whole top 2 primary system was really to bring more moderates into the process. This came out of a deal with Abel Maldonado and the Democrats over the budget under Schwarzenegger, and now it's having some real unintended consequences.
Well, I think they really didn't know what they were talking about. They thought it'd be I think they actually, I have no idea what they were talking about, because in the end, when you take a district that's heavily one way or another, it's going to be the top 2 of that party. San Francisco, 2 Democrats. Marin County, 2 Democrats, Riverside, probably 2 Republicans. I don't know what they were thinking, that the moderates are going to come in there and swing it one way or another. It's just going to be, you're going to have grudge matches 1 and grudge match 2 all over again. Same people. It's like getting a free preview of your election.
All right, well, we're going to talk more with Michael Yaki tonight at 6 o'clock. Stay with in 2012. Today is primary day here in California and several other states across the nation. We're joined now with our political analyst, Michael Yaki, to give us some perspective on some of the major issues here and across the nation. Let's start with Wisconsin. Everybody's talking about that. Of course, there's a recall election against the governor there, Scott Walker. All of this started with his dispute with the unions over collective bargaining. You had some information about how people feel about this issue there.
Well, it's interesting because a Marquette Law School poll showed that about 55% of the people, registered voters in Wisconsin, actually agreed that public unions had too much power. The problem is that how does that translate into actual votes?
Yes.
And this is where the unions have come in, and this is where I think Scott Walker is biting his fingernails right now. He had a 5-point lead in the polls going in. A good ground game can change an election 5 to 6 points, and right now union turnout is higher than it was in 2008 when Obama won the state by 14 points.
Not only that, but a lot of money coming in because of the Citizens United decision by the U.S. Supreme Court. A lot of outside money, in fact, millions and millions of dollars coming into the state of Wisconsin.
$63 million has been spent in this race alone. I mean, since November, it's a longer campaign than the presidential race has been in Wisconsin. The question is going to be, turnout is very high. Because turnout is really high, people are going to look at this as something that has an impact in November, as a precursor to November. Are the Democrats turning out? Are the unions turning out? How does this affect the vote? Right now, the early exit polls show that Obama is leading Romney among people who went to vote by about 5 to 6 points.
All right, so let's talk about turnout here in California, which is expected to be quite low today.
Very low.
There are only 2 propositions, which in itself is unusual in California to only have 2 propositions. 28 deals with term limits, 29 deals with the $1 tobacco tax. Right. With a low turnout, what do you think?
Well, a tobacco tax is a sin tax, which means it doesn't really affect people unless they are consumers. So I think that's a toss-up, and big tobacco tends to lose in these kinds of things. Prop 28 is a term limit question, but the question is if you don't understand it, people tend to vote no. Where low turnout has a big impact, in the Bay Area especially, are all the counties with sales tax measures on their ballots which require 55 or 2/3 vote support to win. Low turnout is bad news for those counties who are all suffering from the big budget deficits in California.
All right, so we'll see what happens if the polls close, of course, at 8 o'clock. The top 2 primary, this is the first time we've done top 2, or the quote-unquote open primary here in the state of California. This is really turning things on their end as well, because it's having some unintended consequences where in November only the top 2 vote getters will wind up going to the poll, going to the ballot in November, which means you could end up with 2 Democrats.
Well, this is a situation
or 2
where
Republicans.
Exactly, where if you're a Democrat or Republican, finishing second could be a good thing, because you get a rematch in November if you're in a heavily Democrat or Republican district. The idea of it was that moderates were going to somehow gravitate toward the middle and you get a compromise candidate. That's not happening.
And third parties will also suffer.
Third parties have absolutely no chance in this whatsoever. It's going to be the turnout amongst the faithful, and the faithful are always going to choose one or the other. It's going to be Democrats, 2 Democrats in the races in a lot of places, 2 Republicans in the races in a lot of others.
All right, the polls close at 8 o'clock. Michael Yaki will be back with us. Joining us now to talk about today's primary election results, political analyst Michael Yaki is here with us. And of course, these are very early numbers. It just gives us a sense of where things are going. But the issue today, among the issues today, the 35% expected voter turnout. Why is it just because it wasn't a presidential election involved, or is it more because these issues on the ballot today just didn't resonate with the voting public?
Well, I think generally it's because there's really nothing on this ballot that's driving people to the polls. The presidential race there is actually a presidential nomination on the ballot, but
everybody already knows.
That's a foregone conclusion.
Exactly.
And you don't have any big tax measures that are really driving people, or big policy measures on the ballot that are driving people into the polls.
All right, Dianne Feinstein, we mentioned, of course, she's the incumbent. She had more than 20 opponents on the ballot. She'll go in with 1 person against her, but she's the overriding favorite, of course. But nonetheless, this new top 2 system does in fact kind of open the door during the primary season, and then it knocks everybody out in November.
Right. Basically, you're playing to be that you're doing win place, or showing you want to be the place. It doesn't matter what party you are, what affiliation. It's just, hey, if you're lucky enough to finish second, you get to go in the big show in November. The crazy thing about top 2 is that Dianne Feinstein is probably going to win with 55 to 60% of the vote, and she still has to run again in November.
Yeah, she does. All right, let's look at the propositions. We do know Proposition 28 and 29. We have some results that we heard Grant mention, and they are leading right now. What does this suggest in these early balloting?
Well, absentees generally trend a little more conservative, so when a proposition that you think would have needs more yes votes to win is actually getting yes votes in the absentees, it's probably going to win the day. So the fact that Prop 28 is leading, people tend to like term limits. They have no idea what this actually does, but they see term limits and they go, yes, check. Prop 29 is a tobacco tax. People do not like big tobacco, and they're voting yes, and the absentees voting yes means that election day, trending more liberal, the yes vote will probably win the day in the end.
And real quick, let's talk about the most heated national election was in Wisconsin. The governor recalled there. Scott Walker has survived a recall, the first governor in the history of the country to survive a recall election. But what does this mean for the November election between Mitt Romney and Barack Obama?
Well, you're going to see some furious spinning going on by everyone on both sides, but the fact of the matter is this is a bad day for Barack Obama.
And we're looking at a live picture now of Scott Walker acknowledging his victory. This is going to be tough now for the Obama administration trying to go through the re-election process.
I don't know if Wisconsin moves to a complete toss-up, but it is not good news. The electorate is still mad. The 2010 electorate is still very much in charge. That electorate came out even with high numbers in 2012. The unions put a lot of money in, fell short.
The unions put a lot of money in, but so did the corporations and outside supporters who are now allowed to contribute based on the Citizens United decision in the Supreme Court.
And that's why it's bad news for Barack Obama, because the big money is on the Republican side. The Citizens United money is not going to be the kind of money that he wants to see in the election. That is why this is not a good day for Barack Obama.
All right. Of course, the numbers still coming in California. We'll have an update for you on that coming up on our newscast tonight at 11. Thank you, Michael Yaki, for helping us try to sort through some of what's going on today.
Welcome back, Decision 2012, and we continue to follow the election results that are pouring in from the state's primaries. And joining us now to talk about the primary results is our political analyst, Michael Yaki.
All right, so hi, Michael. Thanks for joining us. Let's start off this morning with the cigarette tax, which went down. It would have added $1, a buck to every pack. Were you surprised by the fact that this lost by a slim vote, but still? I mean,
you got to think, one, there are a lot of grouchy smokers who went to the polls yesterday. Yes. But I think when you think about a low turnout, I think there's still a mood in the electorate. You saw it in Wisconsin. You're seeing it here. People are just fed up, and a tax, no matter what you call it, I think people are voting it down. You see a lot in the Bay Area, a lot of different special assessments, and bonds also didn't make it either.
Yeah, how much did money play into this? We had Big Tobacco spending $30 million in advertising on this campaign.
I'm sure that the message that they were picking up on is the discontent one, which is you think you're paying for a tax for your government. It's not. It's going elsewhere. It's going to somewhere else. They're going to spend it on drinks and caviar at a Vegas casino. You never know. I mean, that's what they were trying to give the impression of. I think it's worked to some degree, but I also think there's just still an anti-politics as usual mood out there in the electorate.
And Measure B seems to be showing that in San Jose, and also a similar measure in San Diego, voting to cut back on the pensions for city workers there.
I know. I think that, again, this is not a good time to be in a public employee union. Public sentiment is that, even in Wisconsin, it was like a 55 to 41% differential between people who wanted some cutbacks in public employee unions and not. This is going to have enormous ramifications for how motivated Obama's people are going to be to come out in November.
This is a huge thing. You got that blow to unions, and then you have the blow to unions where the Wisconsin governor, Scott Walker, survives the recall, and he wanted and did take away the collective bargaining rights of unions.
Well, I think Wisconsin, there are two takeaways. One, money is huge, and a lot of outside money. The whole Citizens United, where someone can come in and write the biggest check they want, has a big impact on that. And the second is that it's going to be a very close race. No matter how you cut it, Obama can't take any state for granted at this point.
Yeah, the money coming in, talk about super PACs. We have the Citizens United decision from the Supreme Court that is allowing unlimited funds basically from corporations. How nasty is this fall going to be?
Well, I think that nasty is what Obama is trying to get out of, if they're smart about it. Nasty turns people off. Nasty turns off a lot of the voters that Obama wants to turn out. It turns off the young. It turns off the middle. It turns off the middle class. That's what he's got to worry about. And that's the lesson from Wisconsin that the Republicans are learning. Is it really big nasty? Helps people more cynical of government. More cynical of government makes them want to throw people out or just stop the nonsense. And I think when you look at the exit polls for Wisconsin, 70% of the people who went in thought the recall was a bad idea, Democrat and Republican.
Well, because typically being angry is a motivator, being against something is a motivator. The status quo, if you like something, you don't tend to come out. So you already enter in a tough spot.
But a lot of what you see right now in campaigns and a strategy among a lot of campaign strategists is what's called voter suppression. You look at how voting numbers have come down in America over the decades, and it's directly related to the amount of money being spent. It bombards people. You're tired of the phone calls at home. You're tired of the mail. You're tired of the negative TV ads, and you just say, I quit. And by quitting, you leave only a few number of people in the room. That's the number they're counting to get to their electoral majorities.
And we passed Prop 14 here in California, so we have the top 2 vote getters running now in the fall. I thought we'd see more Democrat versus Democrat, Republican versus Republican. We had one in Alameda turn out that way, but not as many as I thought we'd see across the state with this new system.
I think what happened is that there's a lot of cannibalism among each party, so that in the end, the Democrat and the Republican actually ended up coming up together. But still, in heavily Democratic or heavily Republican counties, you can see that it's going to be a single-party race, which is going to be very interesting for the general. I think that when you look at Pete Stark in Alameda, the fact that he's got a challenger for November who is probably going to have an election campaign that draws on the middle And on the angry, Pete Stark is in real deep trouble.
All right. Thanks a lot,
Thank you,
Michael.
Michael.
Thank you.
All right.